Hello and welcome to the I Do Wedding Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Nina Adio, a social media marketing expert specific to the wedding industry. On this show, I discuss tips to help you DIY your social media, as well as getting the confidence and income to outsource it. Thank you for allowing this episode to come through on your Bluetooth, your car radio, wherever it may be you're listening from today. Now, let's take your wedding business to the next level. Hello guys, and welcome back to the I Do Wedding Marketing Podcast. It is Nina here, of course. Who else? But if this is your first time here, I wanted to make sure I got to introduce myself. Today on the podcast, we're going to be talking about competition in the industry, particularly my stance and my take on it. And maybe we'll do a follow-up episode on how to be a good competitor or how to, be a bad competitor, because I will let you know that I view competition as a positive thing. But what I didn't talk about, and this is from an Instagram Live, the bulk of this podcast episode, what I didn't talk about is what makes a good competitor and what makes a bad one. I think because it's pretty clear, but I just want to throw it in while we're talking before we get to the meat of the episode, which was recorded on an Instagram Live. And a bad competitor directly copies, right? It's more like copy paste. A direct competitor or a bad competitor is hyper focused on one competitor, really focus on just what this other one person is doing. All right. A good competitor takes in the whole wide world of weddings for inspiration, to get ideas, to serve their clients best. So I just wanted to make that clear before we get into the episode. Now, sometimes I've been recording these episodes on Instagram Live. It's the same way that I record them when I'm at my desk. The only difference is you're there. So if you have questions or things you want me to explain further, you're able to answer them. So if you're not following me at I Do Wedding Marketing on Instagram, I want to recommend you go ahead and do that. Last week's episode, if you missed it, was number 107 on return on investment for wedding professionals. And speaking of investments, I want to remind you all that I offer 90-minute strategy calls where I answer anything you want to ask, or if you don't have specific questions, I do a complete deep dive and run through of how I would create a marketing plan for you, how I would implement it, what I would do. I show you my tips and tricks and so forth. The reason I want to bring this up now is because, like in the wedding industry, come 2024, prices change. So if you want to get this locked in at the prices it's at now, right now the 90-minute call is at $297. I would consider booking as soon as possible, because during engagement season, it's my busy time. Things right before engagement season really book up because people want to get their strategies going. So with that disclaimer out of the way, let's go on and take it to competition in the wedding industry. What I want to talk about today is competition in the wedding industry. I was recently thinking about competition. It's, if you know me, you'll know this reason why. It's because I am a wrestling fan. And wrestling has a notorious chapter of when there were two opposing organizations, WWE and WCW, and competition was just fierce. They were going so hard at one another and really jabbing at one another to get the most views and to get the most viewership. And what happened was the fans won, right? Because we kept getting such great wrestling content. And so this happened again this week with two wrestling organizations really stacking the card against each other so they could beat each other out. So it had me thinking about competition and how competition is, I feel, especially from that experience as a wrestling fan, a good thing, and how you can kind of embrace it as a wedding business, and ways that nowadays with networking groups, with all these great ways to connect, it doesn't have to be this
sketchy, sleazy thing. And what I mean by that is a big part of knowing your competition historically has been shopping, right? You shop, you get the prices, you see how they tour, things like that. And even though it has this negative connotation to it, especially, in the past, there was really no other way to do it. But nowadays, there are so many options and things you can do to get that information, even down to just having candid conversations. When you're in these networking groups with other vendors, you can talk about things like menus and pricing and sales and what you do, and it doesn't become this secret sauce that it previously had been. Because the truth is, you can't hide it, right? Either brides start talking in groups, grooms start talking in groups, or even what happens is, I used to remember this, a venue owner would print out the menu from another venue and say, all right, look what they're doing. So you can't hide from it. So instead you embrace it. And one of the best pieces of advice that one of the owners would give to the sales team was, especially during the holiday season, they'd get a cheaper price from another venue and the sales team would be so rattled and upset trying to reel them back. And she would just tell them, rather than go lower than we can go, just relax. They'll be back next year. And so often they were. So when you're dealing, especially with competition over those corporate businesses that are annual, just breathe, relax. They'll be back next year. Now for weddings, you have to just learn your confidence, right? Because that's a big benefit of competition, is that you have to learn what makes you different. You have to learn what sets your business aside and what you do aside from other people. So what they may be responding to from another wedding vendor may be something totally different than what you're about anyway. And competition really helps you to establish that. And competition helps you to know your brand and work with people who are aligned with it. Because if you're the only gig in town, it's like, yeah, you got that booking. But when you're one among dozens, it's like, I got this booking because they're aligned with me and it's going to be a really great experience. This is something I experienced by having a niche marketing service, right? Because I know that the people I'm going to work with, very often, a lot of that filtering and getting to feel each other out is already done. Because we already know that, by this time we've established, all right, they're in the wedding industry. All right, they're ready to outsource social media. We've already established so much by having that niche topic behind what I do. When you have competition as a wedding professional, you really have to learn who you are, what makes you different, and it helps you identify what couples you would best work with. Competition brings out your best performance. Competition helps you to find your confidence in what you do and what sets you aside. Competition also is an excellent reference point. What are other people doing? What are other people charging? I mean, especially during the pandemic, we saw competitors come together to navigate, what are we doing? And this is something that even happens now where I live, in particular, New York State. Wedding venues have been trying to juggle a lot of labor law changes and things like that. That is a conversation where competition can come together, right? Without that threat of ideas are being stolen, and just be a community and talk about, how are we getting through this? How are we navigating this? If you guys have a common group, let's say maybe you belong to the same local wedding directory, or you're part of a wedding summit series, or maybe you're attending Wedding MBA. These are places where those conversations can be really safe and can be really navigated well from a really genuine perspective of, we just want to make us all better. So help me help you, It also has a reference point, not only for systems, but for ideas. I mean, it's the truth. Look, once you post the events you're doing publicly, people can see it and they can get ideas. And it doesn't even have to be something where it's stealing. It's just the name of the game. Now, what I like to do rather than looking at my direct competition is I like to just go nationwide and say, what is an area like this wedding professionals area? Let's say if I'm thinking about where I am in Long Island, I will just think about some West Coast areas that are the same demographic. Or I notice that Texas is as big on weddings as we are here in New York. So I'll see what are Texas venues doing, or what are Texas photo booth companies doing, what are Texas officiants doing, how are they marketing. And even though they're different areas, what's the same about them is the volume of weddings and the level of weddings. And I can get inspiration and ideas without it being from a direct competitor. So that's a way I use competition for ideas and to generate thoughts without it being direct. You know, you don't want to see your next door neighbors doing a psychic party Halloween week. So you go, well, we have to do a psychic party Halloween week. You know, it doesn't have to be that way. Also, you can get a lot of ideas, not necessarily from competition, but just from other areas. I mean, for me, when I want wedding marketing inspiration, I'll look up real estate marketing and I like to see what they're doing, or I'll look up different niches to get ideas and switch them, right? I'm just looking for something that's going to spark something in me, and then I'll apply it to what I'm doing with weddings. So you can do the same with your business. What I think I saw this week in wrestling, and I'll tie it to weddings, is they stack the cards just to beat out the other person. And you want to stack the card for your couples, right? That's what you want to be doing. You want to be confident in your product and what you're doing, and you want to have it so that you have the best sales process possible all the time, so that you have the best offer possible all the time. Don't let the competition dictate what you're doing. Let the competition validate what you're doing. Let it have you say, look, I offer this. You know, if they want to discount the price, or if they want to do X, Y, and Z, you can go to them for that. But here is what I do, and finding that competition in it. So what happened in the wrestling universe for their developmental show, to beat out the competition, they put on The Undertaker, they put on John Cena, they put on all these people. So it would be like if you were selling a wedding reception at base package, but you threw in a Viennese hour and you threw in an exit station, and then when it's actually happening, you're like, why did we do this? Why did we do this? Just so we booked this wedding? Like, we probably would have booked one anyway. And that's the truth, right? Because WWE NXT, it's called, would have had people watching anyway. People would have watched anyway. So they didn't really need The Undertaker coming in at the end. And they didn't need John Cena because they already had people watching. So how much are you giving away because of your paranoia about competition? And how much is because this is what you do and what you find the confidence in? So that is what I want to say about competition.